Hey explorers, Brian here, and today we're going to be switching quite a few gears as we gear up, see what I did there, for our study of Europe. What kind of gears? Well, we're switching hemispheres and continents, so to get a firm bearing, today let's talk about the formal location of Europe. With so much to talk about, let's lay out our direction. First, we need to talk about our new location, Eurasia. And second, we need to take a look into the actual formal region which defines Europe as its own continent. And third, we fit those two together and discuss how Europe fits into Eurasia. Now, I hear your questions already, but what is Eurasia, and why does it sound like the words Europe and Asia squished together? What is the European continent? Where exactly is Europe? Well, those are great questions, and I think you're in the right place. Eurasia. Now, wait a minute, I thought you said this was about Europe, so what's this Eurasia nonsense about? Well, that's a good, if a little cynical, question, my young friend. Eurasia is the singular gigantic landmass that you see on the map, and the name is indeed a composite of the continents of Europe and Asia, which are both contained by this landmass. Eurasia is almost 21 million square miles, or 36% of all land on Earth, making it the largest continental landmass on the planet. It stretches from the Iberian Peninsula in the west all the way to the Korean Peninsula in the east. And the north of Eurasia stretches across the Arctic Ocean and runs until it hits the Mediterranean Sea, the continent of Africa, and the Indian Ocean to the south. And how many people live in this massive area? Well, only about 5 billion folks, or 70% of the entire population of the world. And, as you may have guessed, a part of that massive continental area is Europe. Formal versus functional versus perceptual. What is formal Europe? Hanging off the western end of this giant landmass is this strange-looking peninsula, which is generally identified as the European continent, but it isn't quite that simple. Europe as a place has largely been defined as a formal region by the perceptions that people have about it. The unique culture, traditions, historical and cultural influences, contributions, and their interactions with other people are what people generally use to set the borders of Europe. So, we're turning the geographic concept of formal region, or the physical location of a place, on its head by defining a formal place with people's perceptions. Interesting, right? So how does this work out? Well, generally speaking, formal Europe is defined as stretching from Iceland, Ireland, and the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the Ural Mountains in the east, from the Nordic countries in the north to the Mediterranean Sea in the south. You'll notice that defining Europe this way divides the massive country of Russia into two parts: European Russia to the west of the Urals, and Asian Russia to the east. A nice, big mountain range, somewhat neat and simple, right? However, if we're dealing with perceptions, it's never quite that simple. Who's in and who's out? So, as people define Europe by cultural and historical connections, there are quite a few people who define things a bit differently. For many, Russia hasn't been considered Europe because it's culturally a bit different, though the connections it shares with places such as Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Caucasus mountain countries would seem to make it at least partially connected to Europe. However, when Russia was identified as the Soviet Union from 1917 to about 1991 or 2, many geographers were loath to identify it with the rest of Europe. Interestingly, we have quite a few examples of other gray areas when it comes to Europe and its formal region. Ukraine. The second largest country in Europe after Russia, Ukraine shares borders with Russia, Poland, Belarus, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. Multiple different kingdoms and peoples have taken part or whole of this country throughout the last 1,000 years, including the Mongols, the Ottoman Empire, and the Soviet Union. This variety of rulers and associations is the prime reason for Europe as a region being so hard to pin down. Again, we're dealing with perceptions, and perceptions about countries which are connected with other organizations considered to be adversaries to Europe at one time or another are especially difficult to parse out. Turkey. Turkey is not considered part of Europe in our study, but at multiple points in the past, the country known as Turkey today has been strongly associated with Europe. For nearly 1,000 years, the Byzantine Empire, located in present-day Turkey, was a powerful trading partner with many parts of continental Europe. It was not until the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century that Turkey became associated with Southwest Asia, also known sometimes as the Middle East. The Caucasus. The three countries of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan inhabit not simply the Caucasus, but a special area called Transcaucasia, or South Caucasia, or the Caucasian states. Transcaucasia, or the area between the Caucasus Mountains, is literally right in the middle between Europe and Asia. For our study, they're going to be included in Europe, but their connections not only to the Soviet Union, like Ukraine, but other parts of the rest of Eastern Europe makes the connection somewhat tenuous. Beyond political distinctions, the Transcaucasus countries also demonstrate a very important idea critical to human geography, namely that areas which have trade connections between large areas also tend to have multiple identities and distinctions because of the people and ideas which pass through them. From all these distinctions, exceptions, and gray areas, Europe, as we'll discuss it, looks like this. Europe defined. With this concept of Europe, we have a continent of about 3.9 million square miles, or a little under 7% of Earth's land area, and making it second smallest continent behind Oceania. This small continent contains about 750 million people, or around 10% of Earth's population. Have you noticed the differences in size in talking about all of Eurasia as compared to Europe? Well, keep that in mind as we discuss the region and its influence on the rest of the world. The continent sits entirely within the northern hemisphere, or top half of planet Earth, and the vast majority of it lies within the eastern hemisphere, with a small exception. That small exception being England, Ireland, Iceland, and a chunk of the Iberian Peninsula. When measuring distance through longitude and latitude, you have to have a prime meridian, or starting point. The prime meridian was established at the height of English power in 1884, and 0 degrees longitude goes straight through the English town of Greenwich. Why? Well, it placed England at the center of the world and was used to divide the world into the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. The meridian has been slightly adjusted in the modern age, but not by much, and the distinction between Western and Eastern remains. One more thing you may have noticed is that the whole continent is pretty far north. Being a geographer, you've probably wondered why Europe doesn't look more like, well, northern Canada. And this is why. The North Atlantic Current, a river of warm ocean water flowing from tropical latitudes and past Europe, serves to balance and moderate the climate. This current is the primary reason for settlement and successful habitation in the area for thousands of years. Without it, well, northern Canada, anyone? Conclusion. Europe is a small continent on the west end of a vast landmass called Eurasia. Because there isn't a body of water or firm physical distinction between Europe and Asia, instead it's been people's perceptions in regards to culture and connections which have largely shaped this continent. In an upcoming lesson about Europe and its functional regions, we'll jump into some of those historic, cultural, governmental, and economic connections. For now, I hope that we have a firm grasp on where we are in the world and we're ready to keep exploring.